Welcome to another story written by Oracle 1. The Monsters in Disguise of the Storm-Battered Lighthouse. Chapter 1. The Keeper Arrives. The boat pitched hard to the side as another wave slammed against its hull, sending a spray of freezing seawater across the deck and into Elias Mercer's face. He held the railing with one hand and the straps of his duffel bag with the other, knuckles pale against the rust-bitten metal. The sky above was a bruised mass of swirling clouds, the kind that seemed to pulse with their own trapped electricity. It was the sort of storm that fishermen whispered about in bars, shaking their heads and muttering that no sane man would go out in it. But Elias wasn't going out into the storm. He was going toward it. Ahead, rising from the churning slate-colored water like the spine of some ancient creature, stood the lighthouse on Blackthorn Rock. One of the last old towers still left standing in the region. From a distance, it looked solid, unyielding, an iron tooth jutting upward, resisting the bite of time and tide. But as the boat cut closer through the foaming waves, its flaws emerged. Chipped masonry, rusted iron railings, windows fractured like ice. The beacon itself, once legendary for guiding ships through the violent northern currents, was dark. Elias swallowed. That darkness felt like a warning. Not too late to back out, the ferryman shouted over the shriek of the wind. He was a wiry man, his face carved with deep, sun-etched lines. Last keeper didn't last a week during weather like this. Elias forced a laugh he didn't feel. "I'll be fine. I trained for this." "Sure," the ferryman muttered. "But the rock doesn't care about training." Lightning split the sky. For an instant, the lighthouse flashed silver, and Elias thought, just barely, that he saw something move in one of the broken windows. A shifting silhouette, thin and strangely angled, like a figure who hadn't learned the correct way to stand upright. But the light vanished before he could blink, and darkness washed over the tower again, leaving nothing but shadows smeared across the stone. The ferryman cut the engine as they glided into the sheltered inlet on the far side of the island. Sheltered was a relative term. The moment Elias stepped off the boat onto the slick black rock, wind punched into him hard enough to stagger him. The world reeked of salt and kelp and something more sediment-like, as if the island exhaled the smell of things buried deep. He adjusted his duffel and started up the winding path toward the lighthouse. Each step echoed strangely, as if the sound didn't travel out into the world, but instead was pulled straight down into the ground beneath him. The path twisted between jagged rocks that resembled leaning human shapes, leaning a little too close, a little too intentionally. By the time Elias reached the tower, the ferryman was already pulling away from the cove. No goodbye, no wish of luck, just escape. Elias stood before the massive door. Up close, the building seemed older, almost prehistoric. The stone blocks were uneven and pitted from centuries of storms. Moss fanned across the walls like dark green veins. A carved emblem, unfamiliar, circular, and unsettlingly intricate, had been etched above the archway. He raised his lantern to get a better look, and the symbol seemed to twist. Just slightly, as if the lines didn't want to remain still. He blinked. They returned to normal, or whatever passed for normal here. Inside the lighthouse, the air was colder than the storm outside, thick with the soggy smell of old rope and rotting wood. The entry chamber was circular, its stone walls sweating moisture. A narrow staircase spiraled upward along the edge of the room, vanishing into darkness. Another stair, narrower and descending, led into whatever lay beneath the lighthouse. Elias stared down into it. A cold breath seemed to drift up the steps, brushing across his face. He closed the door quickly. A metal clang echoed through the chamber. He jumped before realizing it was only the latch. He pulled a small envelope out of his coat, his instructions from the coast office. It was thin, too thin. He flipped through the contents again. Keys. A map of the tower from when it was last surveyed. A folded note that read, in hurried handwriting, "Do not light the beacon before midnight. Do not enter the lower chamber. Do not trust what you see in the windows." That was all. No explanation. He read the last line once more. "Do not trust what you see in the windows." The instructions normally given to a lighthouse keeper were technical. Practical. Nothing like this. He looked up at the nearest window. The glass was cracked, the outside storm lashing against it. Nothing unusual. But then something else caught his eye. A shape. Just a shadow. But not his. It moved only when he wasn't looking directly at it, darting just past the edge of his vision, thin, long-limbed, and gliding across the opposite side of the room. Elias' pulse thudded in his ears. He turned sharply. The room was empty. He exhaled slowly. It was only the storm. Shadows always danced in bad weather. Always. He set his duffel down, took out his oil lantern, and lit it. The soft orange glow pushed the darkness back, but only a little. Shadows stretched uneasily across the curved walls as if reluctant to retreat. Elias climbed the staircase, his boots tapping the old metal steps in a steady rhythm. The air grew colder the higher he climbed, the wind howling louder through cracks in the structure. Halfway up, he paused. Someone was whispering, a soft, breathy murmur. A voice without shape. "He's here." The whisper slithered across the walls like smoke. Elias froze. "He can see us." He turned quickly, lantern held high. Again, nothing. Only the groaning tower and the distant thunder. His heart hammered painfully. He forced himself to continue. At the top of the staircase, the keeper's quarters waited. Bare, cramped, and reeking of damp wood, but at least they had a bed, a desk, and a stove. He brushed dust from the bed and set his duffel down. When he turned toward the window, his breath caught. Outside, the storm raged. Lightning split the sky again. And down on the rocks far below, where the waves crashed and foamed, a figure stood. A man, thin, unnaturally tall, clothing pressed flat against his body by the wind. But the way it stood, its posture, its limbs. Wrong. Then the lightning died, and the figure vanished. Elias took a step back from the window, pulse skittering under his skin. The ferryman's warning echoed in his memory. The last keeper didn't last a week. He tried to laugh it off. Tension, storm paranoia, isolation. It could make any mind twist shadows into monsters. His lantern flickered. The whispers returned. "He's seen us now, but he thinks we're shadows." Not yet. Elias spun toward the door, stumbling over his own boots. Someone was standing at the bottom of the stairs. A silhouette. A man. But as the lantern's weak light reached it, Elias realized, with a cold drop of dread, it wasn't a man at all. The figure was a perfect copy of him. Same clothes. Same posture. Same hair damp from the rain. But it didn't breathe. And its face wasn't finished. Just a suggestion of features. Like clay still being molded. Elias' throat closed, terror crashing into his chest. The doppelganger tilted its head in a slow, jerking motion. Then it smiled. Not with lips, because it had none. But with the folding of the skin where its mouth should have been. Elias staggered back. The lantern shook in his grip. The thing lifted one hand, 5 fingers slowly stretching into shape, bones crackling softly as they formed. It took a step toward him. Elias hurled the lantern. It shattered against the stair railing, flames briefly licking up in a burst of light. The figure recoiled, shadows peeling backward down the steps like burned cloth, then vanished entirely as the flame died out. Elias collapsed against the wall, chest heaving. The storm roared outside. Something knocked softly on his window. 3 slow taps. Tap, tap, tap. Elias didn't move, didn't breathe, not until a voice whispered through the glass. His own voice. "Let me in. Chapter 2: The Imitators. Elias stumbled backward until his shoulders struck the far wall of the small quarters, the impact stealing his breath. The window remained fog-thickened, its glass trembling with each gust of wind, yet the voice, his own voice, seeped through it as though carried by something closer than the storm. "Elias! Open the window. You're getting soaked in there." "Impossible." He squeezed his eyes shut. "It's the wind. It's the storm bending sound." But even as he told himself that, the words twisted hollowly in his chest. The voice outside wasn't distorted by weather or distance. It was too crisp, too carefully shaped. It was mimicking him, perfectly. And then, the voice shifted, subtly but unmistakably. The pitch dipped half a tone lower, just enough to sound like a mockery, like something wearing someone else's skin. "Let me in, Elias." No human could speak like that. Elias forced himself upright, snatched his boot and slammed it against the shutters, closing them with a sharp metallic clatter. The voice halted. Silence. Just the roaring storm and his ragged breathing. He stepped back from the window, pulse pounding in his throat. The lantern had shattered downstairs. Only a dying sliver of orange light flickered weakly on the stairwell, and that meant he was nearly blind in the room's corners where those shifting shadows might gather. He lit the backup lamp on the desk. The pale glow barely scraped the darkness back. A thought pierced through his panic. "I need answers." The lighthouse's previous keepers left logs. Maybe one of them had seen these things. Maybe the instructions, cryptic as they were, weren't exaggerations. Elias opened the desk drawer. Inside, beneath scattered oil rags and weather-warped charts, was a single thick ledger. Stained, swollen with moisture, edges fraying. He pulled it out, placed it on the desk, and opened it to the last entries. Keeper's log, Adrian Holt. December 5th. Elias read, "The shadows watch me at night. They move when I'm not looking. They whisper to each other. They whisper in my voice. I think they're learning." His blood ran cold. December 7th. "One of them copied me. Perfectly. Until I got closer. Then the shape melted, like wet paper collapsing into itself. It reformed quickly. They are unfinished things, always working to perfect their disguises." Elias swallowed hard. December 10th. "Do not let them touch you. Their skin is cold but it burns. Like frostbite that spreads too fast. My arm hasn't stopped shaking. I'm losing sensation." A yellowed stain covered part of the page, and the next lines were only partially legible. "Only safe place left, beacon room, but, calling me." The final entry trailed off mid-sentence. No body had been found. The office workers had assumed Holt abandoned the post in the storm. But Elias now knew better. His gaze drifted to the staircase leading upward toward the beacon chamber. If Holt used it as refuge, maybe Elias should do the same. But first, a sound stopped him cold. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate, coming up the stairwell. Elias snatched the ledger like a shield, though it could do nothing, and backed into the far corner of the room. The footsteps stopped just outside the door. A shadow appeared beneath the crack. Thick, wrongly shaped. Something tall, its proportions stretched too far. Silence. Then, a gentle knock. Tap, tap, tap? Elias didn't answer. Couldn't. His throat was too tight. A voice followed. "Elias, it's me." His breath stilled. The voice was Adrian Holt's. Even though Elias had never heard Holt speak in his life, he knew, instinctively, that the thing outside wasn't guessing the tone of the man who had written the ledger. It was using it, trying to lure him, trying to discriminate which human voice would open the door. "Elias," Holt's voice crooned. "You have to help me. They're everywhere. Please let me in." Elias tightened his grip on the ledger until the old spine creaked. More footsteps joined the first. Then more. 3, 4, 5 distinct sets of feet, shuffling up the stairs, stopping outside the door. Shadows pooled beneath the crack, the darkness thickening unnaturally until it seemed viscous, like a tar-black substance seeping across the floor. One voice became 2, then 3, then dozens, a cacophony of mimicked voices, his own, Holt's, others, all whispering, calling, crying out, begging for him to open the door. "Elias, let us in, help me, please. Elias?" Their synchronization was off. Some phrases overlapped, others paused at bizarre intervals. Some voices were too deep, others too shrill. They were learning speech but not timing. Practicing, perfecting. He backed away from the door as the chorus grew louder, until it sounded like the entire stairwell was filled with imitation humans. The shadows darkened, thickened. The knob trembled. Elias grabbed the iron poker from the old stove. The whispers rose into a frenzy, pleading, demanding, mocking, mimicking laughter, mimicking sobs. Then, silence. The shadows withdrew instantly, as if vacuumed back down the stairs. The door stopped, trembling. The only sound left was Elias's own gasping breath. He waited a solid minute before moving. Then he opened the desk drawer again. Under the ledger was a metal key ring with 3 old keys. One was labeled, BCH, Beacon Chamber. He grabbed it. He grabbed his coat. He grabbed the lamp. And he moved for the stairs leading upward, heart rattling in his ribs like a trapped creature. He paused at the door, listening. No footsteps. No whispers. Only the storm battering the glass. Taking a deep breath, he cracked the door open and stepped out. The stairwell was empty. Completely empty. But something wasn't right. The darkness didn't feel like it was simply there. It felt like it was waiting. Elias ascended slowly, one hand on the railing. His lamp flickered but held, the flame stretching tall and thin as though pulled toward the shadows themselves. Halfway up, the wind howled through a fissure in the tower wall. The entire lighthouse shuddered. Masonry dust fell like pale snow. He reached the next landing. And stopped dead. Shadows stretched along the wall, far too many, far too tall, like silhouettes of thin, strange figures plastered to the stone as they waited for the right moment to peel free. He tightened his grip on the lamp. "Stay, shadows," he whispered, voice trembling. One of the silhouettes twitched. Elias climbed faster. When he reached the beacon chamber, he shoved the key into the lock, turned it until the old mechanism groaned, and pushed the heavy door open. He stepped inside in a rush and slammed the door behind him. For a moment, he felt safe. Then he turned, and his stomach dropped. Someone else was in the room. Standing beside the silent beacon. A small girl. Her back to him. Her dress soaked as though she had climbed straight out of the sea. "Hello?" Elias whispered. She turned slowly. Her face was not a child's. Not fully. Her skin hadn't settled yet. Her eyes were wide, vacant spaces still forming their shape. Her smile too wide, too familiar. It was his smile. The girl took one unsteady step toward him. And in his own voice, she whispered, "We can wear anyone we want." Chapter 3. The Children of the Fog. Elias stumbled backward until his shoulders struck the cold metal of the beacon room door. The little girl, no, the creature wearing the semblance of a little girl, tilted her head at an angle too sharp for a human neck. Her wet hair clung to her face in limp strands. Her dress, though shaped like fabric, dripped something darker than seawater. "We can wear anyone we want," she repeated in his voice, his exact voice, every inflection perfect. Elias's grip tightened around the iron poker. "What are you?" he whispered, though he feared the answer. The creature blinked once, slowly, the skin of her eyelids smoothing downward as if the act was new to her. And then she took another step forward. "You brought us a voice," she said, the tone shifting between childish and hollow. "We like voices." Elias raised the poker. "Stay back." The girl stopped. Her face shifted, subtly, unnervingly, cheeks pulling tighter, jaw lengthening, features adjusting as though someone invisible molded her flesh like warm clay. A second voice seeped from her lips. Adrian Holt's voice. "You have to help me, Elias." Elias's breath knotted in his throat. "You're not him." The creature smiled, her face folding into a disturbingly elegant imitation of Holt's, though the eyes didn't match. They remained dark and empty, two murky wells without reflection. "He wanted us," the Holt voice whispered. "He called for help. We answered." The floor vibrated beneath Elias's feet. Not from the storm, not from the wind, from below, from something moving in the lower chambers. He stepped back until he felt the cold metal of the beacon against his spine. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "This room is safe." At the word safe, the creature's head twitched. "There is no safe," she said, using the voice of a woman Elias had never heard before, sharp, older, trembling. "Not here. Not above. Not below. Not anywhere your shape can go." Her skin rippled. Her shoulders rose, splitting into thin, jagged angles as if her bones were reconfiguring. Elias swung the poker. The creature jumped back, not with the reflexes of a child, but with the skittering motion of a spider. She clung to the curved wall for a moment, hands and feet spread unnaturally wide. Then she dropped lightly to the floor and retreated toward the corner opposite him. "You don't understand," she whispered, face returning to the unfinished child shape. "We only borrow. We only shape what you give us." "What I give." She pressed a thin finger to her lips. "Hush. They're coming." The wind slammed against the lighthouse, shaking the glass panes lining the beacon room. Elias turned toward the windows, and his blood iced. Black shapes moved through the fog outside. Tall, thin, wrong. They glided along the balcony, their limbs bending as though their joints were placed in entirely different places than human anatomy allowed. They pressed close to the glass, their silhouettes stretching grotesquely with every flash of lightning. One of them turned its half-formed head toward him. Its face was smooth, blank, searching for a shape. The girl creature spoke again, voice quivering with strange amusement. "They want your face, Elias. You have nice edges." He didn't understand. "Edges? What edges?" A thunderclap boomed overhead. The glass trembled violently. Elias realized too late that the shadows were imitating, practicing, repeating the girl's movements, repeating his stance, learning. A long finger tapped against the glass, leaving a trail of dark residue. Tap, 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 the same sound that had echoed against his window earlier. But this time, it wasn't an invitation. It was testing. The girl stepped closer to him, slowly, carefully, as though she feared the other creatures more than she feared him. "You shouldn't stay here," she said in a whisper that almost sounded human. "If you stay, they'll all wear your shape. And then they won't need you anymore." Elias's heart slammed in his chest. "Why are you warning me?" She breathed in raggedly, a sound that didn't match her still-forming lungs. "Not all of us want to be what they are." Her skin rippled again, flattening, smoothing, shifting between ages, genders, incomplete features flickering like candlelight. "Some of us remember what we used to be." "What you?" Elias began, but the girl flinched violently, turning toward the stairs. Her form shimmered briefly like a heat mirage. "They're coming up now. The ones who lead. The ones who finished Holt." Elias grabbed his coat tighter around himself, poker still in hand. He looked toward the door. "Where can I go?" "Not back down," the girl said, shaking her head so fast her hair slapped against her cheeks. "They're crawling up the walls too." Elias glanced to the windows. Impossible. The lighthouse was 100 feet above the sea. But then, a pale, malformed hand slapped against the glass. Another. Then another. Dozens. The creatures began climbing the exterior, dragging themselves upward with jerky, unnatural motions. Their unfinished faces pressed against the windows, smearing black moisture. The girl moved closer to Elias. Jumping won't help. Running won't help. But you must hide where they don't look. Where is that? Her gaze shifted toward the spiral staircase leading to the maintenance platform beneath the beacon's machinery. An area so narrow no fully grown person could stand upright. Elias hadn't even noticed the small hatch leading to it before. They don't understand cramped spaces, she said. They don't like them. They don't know how to fold right in tight places. The footsteps began ascending the main stairwell, slow, uneven, hundreds of them. Like a swarm, Elias lunged toward the maintenance hatch. The girl followed, her form flickering more rapidly as terror overtook her. He wrenched it open. Darkness yawned beneath them. The girl looked back at the beacon room door. Hurry. If they see you, they'll make another you. And the copies don't stop. Elias climbed down into the narrow space, twisting his body to fit between rusted pipes and the massive gears that once turned the beacon's rotation. The girl followed, contorting too easily for a child-shaped creature. She pulled the hatch closed just as the stairwell door slammed open. Shadows poured into the room. Elias felt the girl tremble beside him. They're looking for you, she breathed. Footsteps creaked across the floor above them. The glass windows rattled as more creatures pressed their faces against them. Elias tried not to breathe. Then, a voice, deep and resonant, filled the beacon room above. A voice that sounded exactly like him. Where are you hiding? The girl clutched his sleeve. That one, she whispered, is already perfect. Elias felt the bottom drop from his stomach. Outside, the wind wailed like a dying animal. Above, his own voice echoed again, closer this time. We just want to wear you. Chapter 4 The Faces in the Fog. Elias woke to the hiss of wind slipping through the cracks in the lantern room walls. For a moment he couldn't remember falling asleep. The last clear memory was the light dying, the figures at the glass, and Mara's terrified whisper saying his name. Now the lantern room was empty. The single emergency lamp glowed faintly, its light thin and useless against the storm outside. The glass vibrated with each gust, as if something pressed against it, or scraped by. Mara? His voice came out hoarse. Silence answered. He stood too fast, his head spinning. A sickly cold clung to the metal floor, as though the storm had seeped inside. He pushed the feeling down and forced himself toward the stairs. Mara, are you down there? Still no reply. The spiral staircase groaned with each step as he descended. The tower felt wrong, stretched somehow, like he had woken in a slightly different version of it. The angles didn't sit right in his vision. The hum in the walls pulsed, alive, hungry. Halfway down, he found the first smear of red. It dragged along the inside of the railing in a trembling line. Not blood. He knew the scent of blood. This smelled like brine and rot, like the remains of something scooped off a beach after 3 days beneath the sun. The viscous streak quivered as if reacting to his nearness. He stepped around it, gripping the railing tight enough to hurt. At the base of the stairs, the main room was dim. A few oil lamps flickered, casting faint orange pools on the floorboards. Rain hammered the windows so hard they bowed inward with every hit. Mara? He called again. This time he heard something. A faint shuffle. A soft, wet shift of weight. Then, Elias. He froze. The voice sounded like Mara's. Almost. He followed the sound toward the small storage room at the back. The door stood open, and the air inside was wrong, too warm, too still. He stepped into the doorway, heart thundering. A figure sat in the corner, knees pulled to chest. Mara. But her back was turned. Mara, he breathed in relief. You scared me. Are you hurt? She didn't answer. Mara? Slowly, so painfully slowly, she turned her head, not her body, just her head, farther than a human neck should allow. The dim light caught her face. Elias staggered back. Her eyes were wrong. Dilated, black, stretching almost to the edges. Her skin looked hollow, pulled taut like damp paper over something that wasn't bone. "Elias," she repeated, her voice echoing thickly from somewhere too deep inside her throat. "Why did you turn out the light?" He couldn't speak, couldn't move. Mara unfolded herself, joint by joint, the way a puppet might if its strings were tugged by unseen hands. She stepped forward, bare feet dragging across the wooden floor as if she couldn't remember how to walk. "Stay back," Elias whispered. But the thing wearing Mara's face smiled, stretching her lips too wide. "Don't be afraid," it said. "We wore her shape so you would not run." Elias bolted. He slammed the door behind him, chest heaving, and sprinted toward the lighthouse entrance. The outer door rattled violently. Not from the storm. Something on the other side was pushing. He backed away slowly. Then a voice drifted through the cracks in the wood. "Elias, please, let me in." Mara's voice. Perfect. Familiar. Impossible. He squeezed his eyes shut, gripping his hair, trying to steady himself. The storm outside roared, but beneath it he heard murmurs, dozens of voices, layered, whispering, coaxing. He forced himself toward the radio desk. If he couldn't save Mara, he could at least call for help. The radio crackled, broken from the earlier surge, but he flipped the switches, adjusting the frequency again and again. "Mayday," he said, voice shaking. "This is Lighthouse Blackridge. There's something on the island. Something wrong. Please respond." Static. Then, a reply, faint, distorted. "Elias." Every hair on his arms rose. "Don't run," the voice said. "We are right behind you." He spun. Nothing there. Then footsteps on the stairs above. Slow. Measured. Coming down. He backed into the corner, eyes locked on the stairwell. The shadows stretched unnaturally, bending, twisting, as if stretching toward him. "Mara?" he whispered, though he knew it wasn't her. Black fingers curled around the railing. The shape descended. Not Mara. Not even close now. Only wearing her face like a mask pulled too tight. He stumbled backward, hitting the radio table and knocking it over with a crash. The creature paused at the bottom step, head tilting in a jerky, unnatural motion. "We like your shape, Elias," it whispered. "We will wear it next." Elias ran for the only place left, the top of the tower. Up the stairs. Up and up, until his lungs burned. The creature climbed after him, silent, except for the wet scrape of its limbs against the metal. He burst into the lantern room, slammed the hatch shut, and threw his weight against it. Something hit it from below. Hard. The metal dented inward. He grabbed the emergency lamp, raising it like a weapon. The storm outside swallowed the world in white roaring darkness. The lantern room groaned, glass trembling. The hatch bulged again, then split. A black hand shot through, fingers clawing the air. Elias screamed and swung the lamp down. It shattered, plunging the room into near darkness. Wind howled through the broken glass. Rain speared inside, cold as knives. Below him, the creature laughed with 100 stolen voices. And then, silence. Total. Smothering. He waited, trembling, knowing the dark now hid worse things than the storm. Then, from the shadows beside the broken glass, a child's voice whispered, "Let us in." Chapter 5. What the Storm Wants. Dr. Calder did not return with the lantern. Elin heard his footsteps fade down the metal stairs, swallowed by the storm howling through the lighthouse vents. Then, nothing. Just the rhythmic groaning of the tower as the wind shoved against its stone ribs. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the thunder shaking the coastline. It was the kind of silence that felt arranged, as though the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for something unspeakable to unfold. She stood in the lantern room, soaked, trembling, the beam flickering weakly as if even the light was afraid. The glass windows rattled like chattering teeth. Each flash of lightning lit the ocean in white bones, revealing the jagged black waves tearing at the rocks below. "Calder," she called, but her voice died half-formed, absorbed by the storm. She wrapped her arms around herself and stepped toward the stairwell. It yawned below her like a throat. When she reached the top step, a sound floated upward, soft, dragging, like fabric against metal. A scraping. A slow, wet inhale. Elin froze. Then she heard it again. Not footsteps. Something imitating footsteps. She slowly backed away, every nerve electrified. The storm light flickered behind her, throwing long shadows across the walls. Shadows that quivered a half-second too late, as though trying to remember how to follow her. She glanced over her shoulder just in time to see one stretch, elongate, twist into something narrow and wrong before snapping back into the shape of her own silhouette. Her breath caught. The storm rumbled deep in the tower, a growling belly. She was not alone. She backed toward the lantern housing, keeping her eyes on the stairs. A figure appeared, slowly rising like a puppet being pulled up by invisible strings. A head emerged first. Dr. Calder's head, tilted at an angle no living neck could support. "Elin," the figure croaked. Calder's voice. Calder's clothing. Calder's shaking hands slicked with seawater. "You need to come quickly?" His face twitched. Something beneath it shifted, like a creature adjusting inside a fleshy suit. The thing wearing Calder blinked the wrong way, lids closing side to side like a fish. Her stomach flipped. "No," she whispered. "You aren't him." The creature paused, head jerking sharply, as if reconsidering its approach. Then Calder's lips pulled into a too-wide grin. "We're learning you," it said, Calder's voice, but layered with a second tone beneath, watery and gurgling. "You don't run. You freeze. That's good. Very good." Elin stumbled backward, hitting the cold iron railing. Calder, the thing inside Calder, took another step. Its left leg bent backward first, then twisted, popping into place as if it had misremembered how knees work. Lightning flashed again, and in the reflection on the lighthouse glass, she saw it clearly, not Calder's shadow but something tall, thin, many-limbed, like seaweed shaped into a humanoid form, writhing and dripping. It was wearing him like a mask. Elin bolted. She sprinted around the lantern housing and down the opposite stairway, metal clanging beneath her feet. Breath tearing through her lungs. Behind her, a metallic scraping echoed, Calder's boots dragging at odd intervals, as if the creature didn't quite know when a step should end and when the next should begin. "Elin," it called. "Don't run. We only want your shape." She flew down the stairs into the keeper's quarters. The room flickered with dim emergency lights powered by the backup generator. Rain leaked through cracks in the ceiling, forming small trembling puddles. She ducked behind the bunk beds, forcing herself to breathe silently. Drip, drip, drip. Her heartbeat pounded against the wood frame. Then, softly, footsteps entered the room. Except it wasn't footsteps. It was many steps. Too many. As if Calder had suddenly grown additional feet or something else was moving with him in tandem. "Elin," the voice was closer now. "I know your habits. You hide to think, to plan. Very human." She clamped a hand over her mouth. The creature moved around the room slowly, sniffing. The sound was wrong, wet, porous, like ocean water being sucked through holes in driftwood. When it exhaled, she heard a faint chattering, like tiny teeth scraping against bone. Her body trembled uncontrollably. "Elin," the voice croaked again. "You smell like fear. We learn fear. We wear fear. We become fear." It stopped directly on the other side of the bunk. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying it couldn't hear the wild drum of her heart. Then, soft, gentle, deliberate, A fingertip tapped the top of the bunk bed. Once, twice, thrice. Tap, tap, tap. Elin. This time the voice whispered inches from her ear, even though no breathing thing crouched beside her. "We found you." The bunk suddenly lurched upward as if something enormous lifted it. She crawled out from under it just as the frame crashed down, smashing the wooden floorboards with unbelievable force. She scrambled to her feet, slipping on the wet tiles, and sprinted again. Behind her the creature screamed, not like a human, but like a storm funnel collapsing underwater. A bubbling, gurgling roar that made the walls vibrate. She hurled herself into the maintenance corridor and slammed the thick steel door behind her. She turned the wheel lock. The door shuddered with violent, unnatural blows. Boom, boom, boom. "Elin, let us in." She backed away, chest heaving, until she hit the opposite wall. The blows stopped, and in the sudden silence she heard it, drifting through the vents. A new sound, a familiar one, her own voice. "Elin, help me." She froze, blood running cold. It was exactly her tone. Exactly her cadence. The creature had stolen it perfectly. "Elin," her voice pleaded from the other side. "Don't leave me alone." She shook her head violently. "No, that's not me." Her voice cracked. "That's not me." But the imitation continued, now mimicking her frightened breathing. Her gasps. Her trembling sobs. It was learning her, studying her, perfecting her. The chamber spun. A metallic taste filled her mouth. The creature wasn't just wearing Calder. It was collecting them, one human at a time. And she was next. The lights flickered overhead, humming with static. The radio at the far end of the corridor crackled. "Elin," whispered her voice through the old transmitter. "You won't survive the storm. But we will. We can help you. Let us wear your shape." She backed up until she hit the emergency ladder leading to the lighthouse base. She didn't think. She climbed. The metal rungs were slick with condensation, nearly sending her slipping into darkness. Her muscles burned. Each breath seared her chest. Below her, something began climbing too. Fast. Too fast. "Elin," the two-layered voice hissed. "You can't hide from yourself." She climbed harder, lungs screaming, until she reached the hatch. She slammed it open and crawled out onto the base level. A circular room where the lighthouse machinery groaned like trapped animals. Lightning blasted white light across the room. And in that instant she saw them. All of them. Shadows on the walls, dozens, maybe more. Human shapes. Child shapes. Shapes with limbs too long, too crooked. Shapes dripping seawater although the floor was dry. And none of the shadows matched her movements. They shifted a heartbeat late, or early, or not at all. Something whispered from every corner. "Elin, Elin, Elin." She stumbled backward into the foggy glass of the outer door. And the largest shadow peeled itself off the wall. Standing upright, growing taller, reaching for her. "Elin," it whispered. "Let us in." She screamed and threw herself through the door into the raging storm. The wind nearly knocked her flat. Rain cut like shards of ice. Waves exploded against the rocks below, sending sprays of freezing water up the cliffs. She ran toward the boathouse, every step slippery, her breath ripped away by the wind. The lighthouse groaned behind her, its beams swaying dangerously as the storm thickened. She yanked open the boathouse door. And froze. A figure stood inside. It turned slowly. Dr. Calder. Perfectly whole. Perfectly alive. Smiling warmly. "Elin," he said gently, "thank God. I've been looking for you everywhere." Her skin prickled. The creature had learned something new. Calder took a step forward. "Elin, don't be afraid." She stepped back into the storm. "I am afraid," she whispered. Calder's smile widened, just a fraction too much. "Good," he said. Lightning lit the sky, and the thing wearing Calder lunged. Chapter 6. The True Shape of the Lighthouse. The creature lunged, and Elin threw herself sideways, slipping on the rain-slicked stones as Calder's body hit the ground where she'd stood. The impact sounded like a sack of wet sand striking the floor. In the flash of lightning that followed, she saw his limbs twist and reset like ropes snapping back into place. The disguise was tearing. It rose slowly, too slowly for something pretending to be human. Its spine cracked backward, then forward again, head jerking like a marionette being yanked by impatient hands. "Elin," it said, but the borrowed voice wavered, broken. "Don't run?" She did. She sprinted across the storm-battered path toward the jagged rocks sloping toward the sea. The wind battered her from all sides, pushing her toward the edge. Her soaked hair slapped across her face. The storm had grown thicker, denser, almost intelligent in how it shoved and pulled her. Behind her, the creature followed, dragging Calder's feet much faster than legs should bend. Every few steps, it stumbled, then corrected the movement as if studying how to walk while wearing a body too small, too fragile. Lightning slashed across the sky. The world became a frozen white photograph. Elin mid-stride, the creature lurching behind her, the lighthouse beam wavering drunkenly. She slipped on a rock but caught herself. The roar of the ocean below was deafening. She reached the rusted emergency shed, the last structure before the cliffs, and slammed the door behind her, forcing it closed with her shoulder. The shed shook violently as the storm hammered at it. Inside was darkness, cobwebs, ropes, broken crates, the smell of rust and brine, and something else, breathing, deep, slow, wet. She held her own breath. Something moved in the corner, something huddled, trembling. A shape. Elin reached for the small emergency flashlight hanging near the door. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped it. She turned it on, and froze. Dr. Calder lay on the floor, the real Calder, half-conscious, pale, soaked in seawater, his chest rising shallowly. "Elin," he rasped. Terror punched the air from her lungs. If Calder was here, then the thing outside was wearing something else. She dropped to her knees beside him. "Calder, Calder, look at me, what happened?" He grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. His eyes were glassy, bloodshot, filled with something worse than fear, knowledge. "Elin, it learns us," he choked out. "It studies. It copies. It takes what it needs. Where's your shadow?" she whispered before she could stop herself. Calder closed his eyes. "It took that first." She covered her mouth. Her heart hammered so violently she felt faint. The shed door shuddered with a heavy blow. Boom! She scrambled backward, dragging Calder with her until they pressed against the far wall. The light flickered. A crack formed in the door. "Elin," her own voice whispered through the split wood. "Please, let me in. I don't like the dark." Her skin crawled. "That's not me." Another crack. Another blow. The hinges groaned. "Elin," Calder rasped, gripping her arm again. "Listen to me. It doesn't just mimic. It absorbs. Every time it wears someone, it keeps something, a memory, a voice, a desire." His gaze drifted to the storm outside, visible through a broken window. "A purpose. What does it want?" she whispered. But he was already shaking his head, too weak to answer. The door split at the top, and a hand reached through. Calder's hand. Except the fingers were too long, the joints bending the wrong way, seaweed-like tendrils dripping from the knuckles. The skin peeled back as the creature forced the arm farther in. "Elin," it sang with her voice, Calder's voice, the lighthouse keeper's voice she had never met, all braided together. "We've been waiting." She dragged Calder to the other side of the room. The shed groaned as the creature forced the door wider. Lightning cracked open the sky. The creature stepped inside. It no longer wore Calder. Or her. It didn't need disguises now. It stood nearly 7 feet tall, Body made of shifting strands of dark kelp, seawater dripping constantly from its many parted limbs. Faces, half-formed, flickering, appeared briefly across its surface, like memories trying to speak through oil. Elin, dozens of voices layered together. We want to be whole. It took another step. Calder coughed blood. Elin, the lighthouse, the beam. Light hurts it. Her head snapped up. The lighthouse beacon, of course. The way the shadows twitched during the storm. The way the creature avoided direct light whenever it could. She grabbed a flare from the emergency shelf. Her hands trembled so hard she almost dropped it. The creature tilted its head, studying her decision in real time. Elin, it murmured, we know your choices now. She ignited the flare. Red light exploded in the darkness, bathing the shed in a hellish hue. The monster shrieked, an ear-splitting, gurgling, drowning sound, and reeled backward, its limbs folding and unfolding like tangled ropes. Elin, it gasped in a child's voice. Why? She didn't hesitate. She dragged Calder out of the shed as the creature writhed, its shadows stuttering erratically. Rain hammered them instantly. Wind shoved them sideways. The waves below clawed at the stones as though begging them to fall. The lighthouse beam swung across the cliff path. Elin pulled Calder toward it. Behind them, the monster recovered, slow at first, then faster, then impossibly fast. It moved like a storm surge, skittering across the rocks, limbs scraping stone. Elin! It screamed with her voice, Calder's voice, dozens more. We are you. The lighthouse door slammed open as she pushed inside. She hauled Calder over the threshold and kicked the door closed. She threw the bolt across with shaking hands. The creature slammed into the door a heartbeat later. The entire tower shuddered. Elin, it whispered through the cracks. You can't escape your own face. She dragged Calder up the spiraling staircase, the flare still burning in her left hand. He coughed violently, gripping her shoulder. Elin, the beacon, turn it to full power. She nodded, gasping, climbing as fast as she could. Every few seconds, the creature slammed against the lighthouse, dislodging dust and sending vibrations through the metal stairs. They reached the lantern room, wind howling through broken panes. The great Fresnel lens towered above them, rotating lazily, too slowly. The mechanism was failing. Elin, the creature whispered from somewhere below. We're coming. She sprinted to the lens controls, slammed the emergency override, and yanked the manual acceleration lever. Grinding metal. Sparks. A terrible groaning noise. The lens began to rotate faster. The beacon brightened, a painfully bright, searing white beam cutting through the storm like a blade. The creature reached the top of the stairs. It stood in the doorway, towering, trembling, its form glitching like a bad reflection on churning water. Elin, dozens of voices begged. Stop. She held the flare toward it, stepping backward toward the lens. You don't belong here, she whispered. The monster's many faces twisted in fury. We belong to any shape, it shrieked. Even yours. It lunged. She leapt aside. The creature collided headfirst with the fully brightened beam. And it screamed. It wasn't the scream of a wounded thing. It was the scream of something being erased. Its limbs flailed, melting in the light. Its many faces dissolved into streams of black water. The storm outside roared louder, as if mourning something ancient and terrible. The creature staggered backward, collapsing onto the floorboards, its form shrinking, until only a pool of ink-like fluid remained. Then, silence. The beam swept the room again. The puddle hissed, evaporated, and was gone. Elin fell to her knees, the flare burning out beside her. Calder lay weakly against the railing, eyes closing, breathing ragged. Elin, he whispered, barely audible. Is it over? Lightning illuminated the empty chamber. The shadows all aligned correctly. The storm began to ease. She took Calder's hand. "I think so," she whispered. But as she turned toward the broken window, she saw her reflection faintly in the shattered glass, the storm-lit silhouette of her face. Only the shadow behind her didn't move with her. It lingered, just a heartbeat late, and then it smiled. For more stories, like and subscribe.